Hello everyone. Now this topic that I'm going to run through today is all on lower back pain, especially for people who are sitting down all day. So apologize if I am slow to move, my legs are quite sore. So you're sitting down at work and you're in this position here for let's say 8 to 10 hours a day, and you'll notice that the hip flexors start to get quite tight, meaning the muscles that flex the hip closer to your chest, and you also do not use your glutes or your bum very much throughout the day, just because you're sitting down for quite some period of time. Now, the hip flexors aren't getting any stronger, they're just getting quite tight. So if you do exercise, for example, and you're feeling your legs are getting tight because they're getting worked, generally that's not too bad of an issue. Obviously it's uncomfortable, but it's a little bit different to tight, weak muscles. So what we actually want to do with tight, weak muscles is stretch them out and then activate them again. And as for the glutes, they're not getting any tighter from sitting like this because they're in a stretched position, but they're still getting weak. So if we're able to release the hip flexors through a certain stretch and activate or strengthen your glutes and hip flexors, then we should help relieve that lower back pain. Now, the issue with the lower back, and it's coming from the hips, is the fact that when the hips are quite tight, you pull into anterior pelvic tilt, meaning your bum sticks out like this, and there's an excess pressure then put on the spine, especially when you're then walking around from this point. Then you go to bend over, you're in anterior tilt, you're just putting all sorts of different pressures on the spine. Now, in a normal circumstance, these aren't actually bad positions to be in. Flexion or extension is fine. It's just prolonged periods of time with your back in this position generally weakens the abdominal muscles, weakens and tightens the hip flexors, and weakens the glutes as well. So we're going to just run through hip flexor stretch and glute activation. There's a lot of abdominal videos that we can run through. Actually, I'll run through one of those as well. So a quick, easy stretch that you can do is putting one foot, I'll do this one, putting one foot on a bench like this, resting your shin on the bench so you don't fall over, using your leg to stabilize the balance of the body, and stretch out like this. Now, this will stretch out the quad and a little bit of the hip flexor, but you can see that I'm still in a little bit of hip flexion here. So how we're going to actually stretch this out, so we're actually going to move to the floor. So you're going to start by stretching out the quad like this. Then we're going to slowly but surely either extend on the bench like this, so we're using the bench to balance and stretching out that hip flexor. So now I can start to feel a nice big stretch through the hip flexor there. Leaning back slightly if you want, but just making sure you're not arching that back. So keep your abdominals engaged while you're still leaning back. To take this stretch even further, we can then go to the ground. Make sure there's a nice soft mat underneath the knee so we're not hurting the knee, and we're allowing a nice big stretch through that hip flexor there. Keeping in mind we're wanting to keep those abdominals crunched so that you're not in overextension, because you won't feel it as much in the hip flexor then. We're wanting to keep a neutral spine, abs engaged, and really stretch out that hip. So we can hold it for 20 to 30 seconds before swapping to the other side, and we repeat this on both sides. Now, a quick one in order to activate the glutes would be either a glute bridge on the bench, which isn't too bad, or we can even use a resistance band to activate those glutes as well. So a good one, you can do this on a chair, doesn't matter too much. We're going to stay over here. Hopefully I'm in frame. What you're going to do is you're going to thrust up all the way to the top, squeeze your glutes there, hold for 5 seconds, then we're going to slowly release down. So you get a nice flat back. It's important that those hips come up towards the ceiling. Thrust up, hold for 5, and we're slowly going to come back down. Now, a reason that you'd actually use the bench is because it helps you use your glutes more as opposed to the lower back. A lot of the time when we do it on the floor, we're just flexing and extending at the hip, and it's hard to increase your range there. Whereas with the bench, because you have a little bit of assistance from the range of motion, you can move so much further as opposed to here. I find that a lot of clients find it easier to activate their glutes doing it this way. Another way you can do it is grabbing a loop band that you see online most places, wrapping it around your legs, as so, pulling this up. Now you can obviously do this one on the bench as well, but this one's going to work a slightly different part of the glute, being the glute med. So it's the glute on the side, and it helps keep those knees out or externally rotate the femur. So we're going to lay down on the bench, on the mat. We're going to thrust up while keeping those knees out. So it's important that you're keeping the knees out because the band's wanting to pull you in, and you'll find that you won't get anywhere near the amount of glute activation if they're kept in. So we're keeping the knees out while thrusting up. We're trying to aim for 15 to 20 reps. If you do 2 sets of those, that'll be an adequate amount of activation through your glutes. You'll definitely feel a burn, and if you link this with a nice hip flexor stretch, you should find that your stability and your pain that you're experiencing through the back does reduce over time. Now, there can obviously be other factors that come into play when talking about lower back pain, but I think this covers the vast majority of most of the issues, especially when you think it's brought on from long periods of sitting. So give those 2 a go. Actually, I said I'd go through ab activation. One thing you're going to do, using that same bench, you're literally going to go from the knees and extend up like this while trying to keep your ribs down. So you're going to hold that position there. It's just an elevated plank. Once you feel fatigue, go back down. Once you've recovered after 5-10 seconds, go back up again. Make sure you're drawing your ribs down toward the hips. Now notice that my hips are actually quite high. So I'm not holding this position here and just letting my lower back take all the load. I'm actually allowing the hips to come up, crunching the abdominals, and really isolating the abs. So that's the third one. And if you link all those 3 together, it doesn't take too long to do. It might take, 5 minutes total, including all the stretches. So give it a go, especially if you're experiencing a lot of lower back pain. It's 5 minutes out of your day, which could save you a lot of time in the future and a lot of discomfort as well. So give those 3 a go.